Okay, we're starting again. This is tape number 2. And you told us about when you guys had moved to Terre Haute, right?
No, I think it's on the tape after that. I think we got to where he was surrendered to preach, and we moved to Cedar. Where did we move to? When Charlotte was born. Split Log.
Yeah.
Split
right,
Log.
Right.
It's about 30 or 35 miles from Joplin.
Okay, well, go ahead and start again at Split Log. Now, was Split Log the place where you lived in the 2-room house? Or was that?
Right. When we moved to Split Log, we moved into a little house that was not modern. Didn't have a bathroom, had an outhouse, and it was only 3 rooms, just in a long building, and no inside doors on the inside. Of course, there was 2 outside doors, but one in the front, one in the back. But there was just the 3. While we lived there, which in nearly every place that Jim was pastor, we had a building program of some kind going. We moved where something needed to be done, or we grew to where it had to be done, or so like that. Every place, nearly every place, we had a building program going on, and that was where it was at Split Log. So we decided to have it made modern, put a bathroom in, and something else I was going to tell about that too, and it slipped my mind.
That house was your parsonage, so to speak?
Right. That was part. It was right next to the door, right next to the church.
Huh.
And the door opened out into the churchyard. It was a real nice, some kind of a stone church building. It was a nice building. But they burned wood all the time. And Jim said he had been pastor, maybe sometimes some pastors had been pastor of churches where they burned out, but he never did know where they froze out because it got cold there. So the men of the community all got together and they cut wood for I don't know how long and hauled it to the back of the church. And this has been many years. I imagine some of that wood is still there that they cut that day because a bunch of the men. It was a community where they all stuck together and they did things together. As I was telling you, there was hardly a week went by that they did not bring us something. Some of the neighbors didn't bring us something off of their farm, or they wanted to give us, or this, that, and the other.
Wow.
You told me one time that you always accepted everything everyone gave you, that even if you didn't want it.
Absolutely, we always was glad. If we were not glad within ourselves, we did not let them know that we couldn't use it or didn't want it. We always accept everything with glad hearts, because I've always said that if you do not accept it, then there's 2 blessings there that's missed. The blessing of giving, and then the blessing of receiving. And so we took everything that anybody gave us, and we're always glad to get it. I had a young preacher and his wife come to our house while we lived at Carl Junction, that said, she came in and she pulled her shoes off, and she said, I said that if any place that we could go and it'd be all right, could pull your shoes off, it would be at Jim and Callie's. So that's the way our people felt about us. And I've said before that there was no place where Jim had to leave. Because I know some Baptist churches, and all of them have disagreements and fusses and asking the preacher to leave and those things like that. That never happened to us at all. Could go back today and find friends and good feelings towards all of us in all of his ministry. That was one of the outstanding things about him.
Okay, would you continue on and tell us more about your 35 years as the wife of a Baptist preacher? Where did you go after Split Log?
We moved to Newtonia. While we were there at Split Log.
This was still in Missouri?
Yes. And while we were there, we had some real good friends that was close, very close to us. In fact, the man bought all of our cows when he decided to go into the ministry as such. living and not going out, not making a living off of the farm. We had a real good family there. They had 2 boys, and one of them was rode a horse all the time. He had a real good horse and saddle, and he rode that horse a lot. And one day he got on the horse and started to cross the highway to some neighbors that lived across that. A truck came along and hit him and killed him the horse. Now that was our first experience with people with grief in the family, with the death in the family and the grief that they went through to lose this son. But that happened at Split Log. Then we moved to Newtonia. We moved to a little bitty old house. It was not very big. I think there must have been 4 rooms in it, but they were small. And right in the middle, there was 2 rooms, and then there was a little room built in between 2 rooms, and it opened up 2 ways. But anyway, in this little room was a well, a water well, and that's where they used to get their water for that house. Well, that's where, that was in that house, in Newtonia. Then while we were there, it was small, and it was run down, and it was just an old house in the first place. And then the church bought a big house in Newtonia. Newtonia was a town that happened during the Civil War, and there was a wall between a part of the town and the cemetery that was built up, that they fought north and south over that wall. And the cemetery is still there today. Many of the soldiers are buried in that cemetery, and it had been neglected when we lived there, and I don't know whether they did anything about it or not, but anyway, we could walk out in the cemetery. And by the way, I love to go to cemeteries. I love to read the epitaph that's on the tombstone. But anyway, many of those graves had fallen in, and it's just a hole there. They had neglected. So, but anyway,
There was a battle fought there in Newtonia?
Right. And there was a 2-story, I imagine, it seems to me like it was 3-story, but it was 2-story. And during the war, it was used as a hospital. And one portion of the hospital, you can see where it's been repaired, was blown off by a cannonball while they were fighting. And it's been used for everything. You made a museum out of it. They had it for a tea room at one time, and I don't know, the building is still there. It's been used for a number of things.
And you live there?
No, we didn't live there. We lived right across the street. That's where we bought the big property in Newtonia. And we had a big, plenty of room in it. And that's Charlotte. I was pregnant when we lived at Carl Junction. Then she was born when we moved to Split Log. We always like to go to auction sales, and we had been to an auction sale one day, and I had gone to the hospital for false labor pains a month before. Then this happened again. We'd been to an auction sale all day, and the car needed gasoline in it, and we had to go get some gasoline. But anyway, Charlotte was born while we was living there.
Wasn't that the night that it was so cold and you had to leave Paul in the car?
Right.
Tell us about the night she was born.
Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As I said, we had been to an auction sale, didn't have any, the car needed gasoline because he had, since that first time when it was false labor, he had seen that the car always had gasoline in it. Somehow or other, during that day, we had been to an auction sale, and he didn't buy gasoline. Along about 11:30, something like that. But first, somebody had brought us some milk, and I had it in a bucket, and I had washed the bucket, and I went to the back door to throw the water out of the bucket. I fell out there. I had big high steps. And I hurt myself, but I didn't pay very much attention to it because I didn't think it was any serious. Shortly after that, I started having labor pains. Then about 12 o'clock, they got so badly, decided that I was going to have to go to the hospital, to Neosho, which was to Joplin, I don't mean Neil, Joplin, which was 15 or 20, I don't have any idea, at least 20 miles from there. Okay, put Paul in the back seat, he went to sleep. and about halfway to Joplin, ran out of gasoline at about 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning. So Jim happened to see a light at a little building off about, half a block from where we had to stop. Went back there, and it was a nightclub, and they were just beginning to close up. And the man that was running the nightclub said that he would help us, and he took me to the hospital. We left Paul in the back seat of the car at 1 o'clock in the morning, way out from nowhere, just on the highway. Went into Joplin, of course, labor pains and this, that, and the other. But in the meantime, Jim went back out. Somebody took him back out to get, that all happened, and we did get Paul to the hospital. But Charlotte was not born. I was in labor pains all of that time, was not born until the next night. That was on Tuesday. On Wednesday night, Jim went to prayer meeting. They were somewhere, it wasn't right there. Anyway, he went to prayer meeting, and they decided that Charlotte better be born. So they had to perform cesarean, and Jim was not even there when all of this was happening. And so Charlotte was born, and after that, I had some kind of a reaction. I almost died. I just thought I was dying. That was all there was to it. Hallucinating, and I had a high fever. Well, the next morning, evidently, I got better. Can't remember what they did for me or anything like that, but I had a terrible time with Charlotte. But when she came, she was a big, fat, healthy baby, just like they had lifted her up and put her in the bed with me. Then
How was Paul born? How was Dad born?
Paul was born in Springfield, Missouri.
No.
Normal life, normal birth, with the exception that when he was born, it was 18 degrees, several degrees below zero, 18 inches of snow on the ground, and the water in Springfield was frozen. No one had any running water, and he was born on that.
Even was he born at a hospital too?
Yes, he was born in the hospital.
And they didn't have any running water in the hospital?
And no ambulances or anything running, except that they would make some exceptions, and a birth was one exception, that they would use the ambulance to take the mother back home.
Did you go in an ambulance? Or did
No,
Jim drive you to the hospital?
I think Jim took me to the hospital. But those labor pains was terrible. I thought I was dying. I didn't want to take anything. Boy, I know. I just wanted a natural birth. But by the time she was getting ready to be born, I was screaming for some help. I was hurting. I was hurting.
So you were in labor with Charlotte for 24 hours almost.
Right.
Okay. Well, then after you were in this Neosho, where did you go to pastor after that?
Went to Carl Junction. That was at Carl Junction.
Carl Junction.
Split log. We went from Split log to Newtonia at the old, where they had the war. Then we went from Newtonia, Missouri to Shawnee, Oklahoma. Charlotte had her first birthday in Newtonia. She had her second birthday in Shawnee, Oklahoma.
What was it like in Shawnee?
At that time, they did have a house for the preacher to live in, but 6 miles from the church was the parsonage. And Jim was driving from the parsonage, the 6 miles. At that time, they did not have gravel roads, did not have blacktop or anything. It was just old red mud. And he had to drive, we had to go a mile north, a mile south, and a mile then back east to the church. Jim started out one time to go to church, and it had been raining, and it rained a lot, and the mud was terrible. And he got almost to the church, and the car died. Couldn't get it started. Burnt the motor out, or whatever you burn out of a car. That car burned out, and it sat there for a week, and couldn't even get it moving or anything like that. Now that was the first church in Shawnee. So then decided to build where the parsonage was, over on the paved highway. And we had some real bad things said about moving the church. Some of the old timers, no, they didn't want to move that church. That church is there, that's where they were converted, blah, all of this stuff like that. Was really a lot of talk about, because they were going to move the church over on the highway where you could get to it. So they tore the old church down, we started building a new one. Beautiful church that stands there today while we were building. And there was a huge bell in the old parsonage, so they decided to move the bell over and put it in the new church building, which was next to the parsonage, and put it up, had to get all kinds of sort of thing to, took that heavy thing up in the balcony, and it wouldn't ring. And I don't think it rings today. I don't know what happened, but it never would ring. But anyway, when we first had church, the building was not complete, and it was built over a cotton patch. And we got in the building outside was all right. We got in the building and had board benches set on, and some of the cotton stalks were still over in the corners of the church. That's where we started. But anyway, we got it built, and that was a wonderful church for cooperation. We had as many in training union as we did in Sunday school. Now this is a rural area, but anyways, prosperous people. When we built that church, then we didn't have any debt whatsoever. A beautiful buff brick building.
Is that
But people would come when we started? They tore the old church down, and they moved the lumber from that one over there to use in the old building. But people would come from all over the community to help. The women would pull the nails and stack the lumber and this, that, and the other. The men would build on the building, but they would bring ice cream freezers. So we had ice cream all the time that we were working at building that church. We got it built. Didn't have to hire very much labor.
Is that the place where Paul tells the story that when he would walk to school every day, he would stop by the grocery store and get a piece of bologna for his bread?
Right.
You'd give him a nickel
Yeah,
every
something
day,
like that.
and he bought a piece of bologna for his sandwich.
And he had to walk to school, because on the rainy days in that red mud, you just slid from one side of the highway, the road to the other. You couldn't hardly use a car. I couldn't drive it. So Paul had to walk to school about a mile in that mud, and he'd come home evening looking like so bedraggled, and muddy. His feet would be muddy and everything. But that's where and there, the teacher was a man, and he would schedule ball games on prayer meeting. And Jim got with some of the men of the church, and they went to the teacher to tell him that they didn't want him to have ball games scheduled for the prayer meeting night. That preacher never had any use for anybody after that.
Okay, and where did you go after Shawnee? You stayed in Oklahoma most of the years that he pastored, right?
Yeah. Then we went from Shawnee, Oklahoma to Warner, Oklahoma, a little town about 35 miles south of Muskogee. Moved in a brand new house. That was a pretty good parsonage that they had for the Shawnee church, but it had a big porch just built on the back. It had been a porch. They had enclosed it in. And cold, absolutely, it was so cold that we just nearly froze to death. And the wooden floors, the floors splintered and this, that, and the other. But anyway, while we were there, Jim bought a new rug for the living room, and I can remember I was so happy with that rug to put down on the floor. I just got down and rolled around on that rug because I was so happy to get it on that old splintered floor. And while we were there, I kept missing food out of the kitchen, this built-in place that they had just enclosed that porch for a kitchen. I kept missing food, and I couldn't imagine what would happen. So one day I went in and opened the cabinet door, and there was a great big old rat had a piece of blueberry pie down in there and was eating it. It had got up on the cabinet, took it down there and got it under the cabinet.
That was in Shawnee?
That was at Shawnee.
Did you charge him money for it?
So you killed the rat?
No, oh no, it scared me to death. I don't know what happened. Anyway, they got rid of the rats.
Oh.
Must have set traps on. I don't remember that. Anyway, we moved to Warner. 4-room house, but it was new, but it didn't have a bathtub in it. It had a stool and a lavatory, but didn't have any bathtub in it. And it was 4 rooms, but it was new. And we had the big old dining room table that we had. We had to have it in the living room. That's where we bought a tea.
It's not someone at your door. It's below us. Don't worry about it.
No, I guess that's right. Okay. Anyway, we lived there, and we had some sorrowful times at that time. Got some people that was not members of church, and he was arrogant and hateful. They had a big cattle ranch. They lived in Warner. But he was, and Paul went to school with one of his girls, and she was a nice girl, and they had good times, that and the other. But one night, Paul was coming home from somewhere, and he took a stick and raked down, as he passed their house, just took a stick and just raked down the screen and went on home. Well, the man got mad, and he turned him in and had him arrested. He thought that he was looking at his daughter, and his daughter wasn't even in the bedroom or anything like that. But anyway, he went to court, and of course the judge didn't make any decision or anything like that, punishment or anything like that. But anyway,
How old was Paul when that happened?
he was in high school. He must have been about a freshman in high school.
Because he mainly went to high school in Muskogee, didn't he?
Yeah, but he was in high school.
Must have been like a freshman.
Probably so. But anyway, Jim got it into her head that this man's name was Trim. His last name was Trim. And Jim just felt like that if Paul got into trouble anymore, he'd have to kill the man. And he made up his mind that that's what he would do if he said anything more about what Paul did. Paul did it just as innocent as anybody could ever do. Not thinking one thing about taking that stick and just going right down the screen, and went on home. So we moved at night to Tahlequah, Oklahoma. We moved at night, had a preacher friend that had a truck, came, and we moved at night.
How long had you lived in Warner? You were there quite a while, weren't you?
Well, Charlotte had her third birthday in Shawnee, and she was her first grade in Warner. So we must have lived there about 4 or 5 years, about 4 years.
Can you remember anything else that happened in Warner besides the deal with the stick?
Not particularly.
What kind of building
the church
program?
grew. It was all run down and everything. It really. But while we were there, we had a revival. We had over 55 conversions in that little church. Most of them were adults, because knowing they'd not had a revival, the church was not going or anything like that. Men thought that women were the only ones that go to Sunday school. Men didn't go to Sunday school and like that. But anyway, we had a preacher an evangelist came in to hold a revival, 2 weeks revival, and he was the preacher that ate onions at night. After church, go home, and he'd always eat a big onion. But anyway, he was a wonderful, wonderful preacher. And We had a very, but then the church was top heavy with people that was not trained. So we didn't have enough Sunday school teachers. We didn't have enough equipped or qualified teachers to teach Sunday school. With all of these conversions coming into the church, eventually it worked itself out. Then when we moved to Tahlequah, Jim was going to college, and we moved there so he could finish. And while we were living at Tahlequah, when we had to put my mother in a nursing home, because she had Alzheimer's and got to where we couldn't control her, I sat one whole day and held her in a chair to keep her from getting up and going out and wandering off, because she wanted to go home. And that went while we were living at Tahlequah. When we were at Newtonia, go back to Newtonia where the Civil War was fought, we had a building program there. They had not had full-time services in the Baptist church all these years that they'd been there, and we celebrated our 75th anniversary while we were there. But anyway, the Methodists met one Sunday, the Baptists met the other Sunday, so we did not have consistent services in the Baptist church. Camp Gruber military camp was several miles from Newtonia. So they bought one of those buildings. It had disbanded, and they bought one of those buildings and moved it back into Newtonia for Sunday school rooms. We did not have Sunday school rooms at all. Everybody met in the auditorium, and here in the corner there, corner there. And while we were there, of course, Jim was new at preaching and not really conducting his services like they ought to be conducted. But anyway, a young woman, a teenager, was going to sing. So time came for her to sing, and she got up on the pulpit, and Jim was standing over here by the pulpit. He was going to preach. So she went up here at the front, started playing the piano, and she didn't sing. Jim was still standing there and didn't recognize her or anything. Didn't even know she was on the platform. And finally, she just sat down, and she didn't sing. And that was one of the first incidents of his ministry. That he just ignored her, didn't even know she was there, and she didn't get to sing. She was, of course, embarrassed, you know, I was.
He was standing at the pulpit getting ready to preach?
Yeah.
And she was off to one side?
She was standing over the side getting ready to sing for the piano. I mean, the piano was down here, it was on the platform.
Right.
And the piano was here. She was standing right up here. He was over here in the pulpit. That was really embarrassing, but it was kind of funny too.
He couldn't think about anything but what he had to get done, huh? He forgot.
And while I'm thinking about it, in his ministry, one of the things that was such it was at Newtonia, his first baptism, got the woman in the baptistry, and he had her turn to the wall, not facing the audience, and when he baptized her, one foot came sticking clear up out of the water. Now, where are we? At Tahlequah. We moved from Tahlequah to Shawnee, Newtonia, and we moved from Newtonia to Warner. Then we went to Tahlequah, and went from Tahlequah to, my word, I can't remember what the town's name was. It's in Oklahoma. Little bitty town. On the highway.
When Broken Arrow, was it?
No, one Broken Arrow. Oh, maybe I've got it. Maybe I got it here. Haskell, Oklahoma. Went to Haskell, and there was quite happenings there too. There was real staunch brothers that came to our church, supported the church, and they had a variety store, and. They were brothers. The brothers married sisters, and they lived in a big house. All of them lived together while we were there.
So how old was Paul when you were in Haskell? Was he like in? Was he still
8th grade, I believe. I think he was in the 8th grade because I know he had a teacher, he was slow in math, and I remember the teacher coming and talking to us about Paul in math.
I bet he wasn't in high school when the thing happened about the screen, the stick in the screen.
He must have been, because we moved from there to Warner, and it was Warner where this happened. We moved from Warner then to Tahlequah, so he must have been in high school.
Okay. Now, so Jim started to college when you were in Tahlequah, and he went. How many years did he go to college? He got his GED and started to college,
Yeah.
and
He graduated from Tahlequah with a Department of Art
associate degree,
associate.
the 2-year degree.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't really going for a preacher's degree. What's the first most common degree that you get out of college when you
Bachelor.
Bachelor of
Arts.
Arts. Bachelor of Arts. I've got his picture here somewhere.
So he graduated from Tahlequah, and then I know he went to OBU at some time, didn't he?
Well, he went to OBU while we were at Shawnee. He was going to riding the bus.
When did he first start going to college? Where were you? Do you remember?
When we were living at Shawnee, he and another preacher friend drove back and forth to the college in Bolivar, Missouri. And he went to college there. And on Wednesday night, they would drive, and I don't remember how many miles it was from Newtonia to Bolivar, quite a distance. Anyway, they would drove back, and he would conduct prayer meeting, and then they would go back, and then he came home over the weekend. And he entered college there, and had never had any high school. His GED degree got him into college.
So he started at college in Missouri. He kept going to college after you got to Shawnee. He went to OBU then, a little bit in Shawnee, and then he finished his first degree when you were in Tahlequah.
Yeah.
And so he had to move a lot of units from school to school, didn't he?
Right. He had a wonderful mind because he had never had any high school at all. And to go right in. Now, he had a little tutoring in math while he was at OBU, but not very long. I don't know why. I don't know if he couldn't pay for it, or I don't know what happened. But I do know that he had some tutoring in math.